Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We are presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program, Cole Zwicker, on. We are going to talk about the 76ers and asset management because they released Trevor Booker after Booker was kind of the biggest piece they got for Jahlil Okafor, although I think that there's a little bit of a mixed reasoning in terms of why they made that deal. They also really have very little to show for Nerlens Noel as well. Trying to find a way to maximize value, I think, is an interesting topic of conversation. We're going to talk about the Washington Wizards and the run that they are on right now without John Wall. I think Cole has some pretty hot takes about that. And then we're going to talk a little bit of NBA draft. Specifically, I want to talk about Daniel Gafford at Arkansas. I have a big thing coming on him at The Athletic on Thursday, but I want to reiterate just how good I think he is on this podcast. So, Cole, how is your day going today?
It's going well, man. I'm a little tired. I just watched the Hellfire Storm. That was, God, what did I just watch? Oh, Alabama, Florida last night, which was just a total train wreck for Alabama.
Oh, my God. Yeah. Like, I had that on a second screen, kind of. I was half paying attention to it. I would have not even begin to thought they made a single shot, and this is Alabama, in that entire first half, had I not seen the score on the bottom. Like, every single shot, I think they missed like 19 in a row at some point, but like every single shot that I looked at, they missed in that half. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, you're lucky you're only half watching. I was completely watching, and I wish I could have that time back.
Do we want to talk about anyone in particular from that game? Because I actually do think that it was a relatively loaded prospect game.
It was. Jalen Hudson played pretty well in that game. I think he has I tweeted earlier, he has probably a top 5-6 pull-up jumper in this class as far as getting to it. He's got that quick rise, good elevation on his shot. I think he can shoot the ball, and he has a little bit more juice off the bounce than he gets credit for. I just don't really know what else he brings your team, but he has an NBA caliber shot.
Yeah, he's interesting to me because if you look back before his last two games against Auburn and Alabama, two very, very good teams, he really hadn't been all that good over the course of his last seven. Like, he had only averaged 9.7 points and 4.7 rebounds on 35% shooting over the course of his last 7 games before that. He's just too streaky for me. Like, whenever you don't bring enough otherwise to the table, like, he's not a good defender, really. I would say he's not even like an average defender. I don't think he is a decent rebounder for his size, I guess. Like, as a 2 guard, he gets 4 rebounds a night, but I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say like I trust him as like a real secondary rebounder. So he's just a scorer, and I don't know what you do with that if he's a little bit streaky.
Exactly. I have him like probably late 50s, early 60s, so I think he's somebody to track. But if you're a streak shooter and that's all you're bringing, like, he doesn't pass that often, basically at all. Like, he had a couple pick and roll reads, but they were really simple, and one of them was just a completely inaccurate pass. So if he's not going to bring any ancillary skills, he's not a good enough defender. I mean, Collin Sexton dropped his shoulder twice on him, dislodged him. I don't think he doesn't have that girth of strength, and he's not that ultra motor oriented. Like, he does try. He's not a bad defender in my opinion, but I look at defenders more translating to the league. Are you a plus defender in college? Are you actually noticeably making a difference either in the team concept or on the ball? And he just kind of checks off as average, and that's not going to be good enough at the next level, I don't think.
Yeah, I would straight up call him a bad team defender. Like, I don't think he's very good on that end, which is fine. Like, he can be a very good college player and not be a good team defender and not do everything else that you need. But when you're translating a guy to the next level, he needs to be able to do a little bit more than just, hit 40% from 3 and create pull-up jumpers. He needs to have like a secondary tangential skill that he can bring to the table. You know what? We're going to talk about Collin Sexton as well after this, after we get through our first 2 NBA topics, because you have some strong opinions on Collin Sexton. And
I do.
I am starting to agree with them a little bit. Just a little bit, not as strong as you are, but just a little bit. Let's first start on the 76ers, though. The Philadelphia 76ers, earlier today, they officially have decided to sign Ersan Ilyasova after signing Marco Bellinelli from the Atlanta Hawks. Both of them were buyouts by the Hawks. Both of them are now Philadelphia 76ers. they've released Trevor Booker to do that. That was always the logical thing to do. And if you're considering like what you do in the past to be a sunk decision, not even necessarily a sunk cost, because Trevor Booker is an eminently employable player in the NBA. He was immediately signed by the Indiana Pacers, certainly had a deal set up to get that done before he was even released. But I guess that where I want to move with this is the idea of trade capital and getting the most out of your trade assets. And I think Sixers fans, even the most ardent supporters, would agree that the 76ers have not done a great job of that since Bryan Colangelo took over.
I'll just start with the foundational principle that I just do not believe in trading a basketball asset for a non-basketball asset. If you trade a pick or you essentially sell a pick for cash, even if it's very low hit rate in the second round, any kind of second round pick can be the difference maker. I mean, you're talking about Draymond Green types of the most extreme, but even like a Jordan Bell, we saw that with the Bulls. How much do they want that pick back? So just working from that, every decision at the margins matters. And that's something that Hinkie always valued, is every single decision mattered. And I'm just not seeing that same principle reflected with the current management.
Yeah, I agree with that. They're thinking more just in the macro, only in the macro. Whereas with Sam Hinkie and with other general managers around the league, and I think that we can use a few as examples and counterweights to this, they think in both the macro and the micro. Like the Boston Celtics, I think, have done a very good job of this over the years, right? They have gotten pretty decent value out of their mid to late first round picks recently, at least over the last couple of years. I think you can certainly complain about some of their asset use in past years, but you know, someone like a Abdel Nader to be on the roster is good. Shimi Ojale is a legit rotation player that went, like 40th overall. Terry Rozier went 16th overall, and he looks like maybe a lower end starting point guard. Would you think that's fair?
Yeah, he's on the precipice. I mean, he's definitely a rotation player. He's a piece. He's turned into a lot more than a lot of people expected.
And the other thing that Boston has done over the years is they've not waited until their assets were at their absolute nadir of value to deal them. Like they dealt Jay Crowder at his highest point of value, basically. And they got Kyrie Irving as well as the Brooklyn pick and as well as, Ante Žižić and Isaiah Thomas. They used those players to move him. They dealt Isaiah Thomas, maybe not at the absolute peak of his value because of the hip injury, but he still was valuable for them because he was coming off of a second team All-NBA year. I think even Rajon Rondo is another example of this. Rajon Rondo wasn't quite the same player that he was in his early years in Boston, but before he could showcase that he was not that, they dealt him. They moved him along to Dallas, and we all know how the Rajon Rondo and Dallas era ended, and I don't think we need to rehash it. Boston has done a really great job of replenishing their assets over the years, and it's something that I think Mike Zarin kind of brought up apparently at Sloan, is just making sure that you use your trade capital in very intelligent ways. The Sixers, you're looking at a situation now where they don't really have anything to show for Jahlil Okafor now. In addition, they dealt a valuable second round pick along with Jahlil Okafor to get Trevor Booker, who they've since released. Additionally, they have also not really gotten anything from Nerlens Noel. And I understand, look, I'm the first person on the Nerlens Noel is overrated by the, I guess, hipster basketball Twitter people. And I don't mean that as a total slight. You know what I mean? I just don't know what else to call them other than the hyper engaged fans. But they don't really have anything other than Justin Anderson to show for him. And Justin Anderson, even though I liked him at the time, does not look like an NBA player, at least in terms of a high-end rotation player. So how much concern should 76ers fans have right now, I guess, for Bryan Colangelo as he continues to build out this roster with, higher end, I guess, building blocks in Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid and depending on what you think of Markelle Fultz, I guess.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I get from his vantage point, they have like 6 second-round picks in the next 3 years, but that doesn't mean you can just give them away for an Okafor type. I mean, that right now is going to go via the Knicks, and that's the 39th pick in the draft. You could get like a Jacob Evans at that spot potentially. Like, that's a really nice pick in this class potentially. So I think that's how you have to think about it, is every decision matters. And right now they do not have the wing capital on that team, especially on their backup units. I mean, Covington's great, but outside of him, they have not hit. And they need somebody to guard smaller players. They just don't have anybody. That's why Mikal Bridges at number 10 for them would be an awesome fit. But I think they have to approach it, continue to build around their core long term. I get that they want to make the playoffs this year. And if you talk about swapping Jahlil Okafor in a second-round pick for Ersan's still a pretty effective player. So that doesn't make it look as bad. But at the same time, if you could have got him anyway without giving up the second-round pick, that's kind of the key. So
yeah, like Ersan was always going to get bought out. Like, unless he got traded elsewhere, this was always going to happen, or you could have just traded for Ersan originally. Like, that is something that Nate Duncan harped on at the time. He was like, why don't they just go get Marco Bellinelli and Ersan for Jahlil Okafor?
Exactly. I think that's the exact right way to look at it. And that's kind of the indefensible part of this, is not being able to go anticipate that. You acquire Trevor Booker, who has a high motor. He's still, I think, an effective NBA player to a certain extent, but you play him next to Joel Embiid. Nobody guards Booker, so that just kind of kills your offense and how they utilized him. I didn't really agree with. For that team, I just didn't think Booker made a ton of sense outside of the character stuff, outside of the motor and getting these younger guys maybe some more veteran established presence in the locker room, but that didn't offset the long-term kind of building ramifications for me.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, the pick in the Okafor deal was a 2019 pick from the Knicks. So, like, okay, we don't know for sure that it's going to turn into something, but given the fact that Kristaps Porzingis is now out for the half of next year, we should feel pretty good about that being a top 10 pick in the second round. Like, what you said is not wrong. I just wanted to clarify.
Perfect.
I'd be a little bit worried if I was 76ers fans. And you know, the Markelle Fultz trade was something I thought at the time was smart. I thought that, you know, Fultz was the perfect fit for this team. It makes sense to me that they're going to go on ahead and select him at number 1. He was exactly what they needed as a pair with Ben Simmons if they wanted to play Ben as a lead ball handler. That did not work out. I think we can just flat out say trading 2 first-round picks for Markelle Fultz looks to be a bad decision, especially 2 picks that are likely going to be top 10 picks at the very least. So I don't know what to do with this anymore. I know that some 76ers fans, like the Rights to Ricky Sanchez crowd, and I don't mean to, and I don't at all mean to disparage them. I actually love both Spike and Mike, who do a great job on that podcast. And yes, I said the name. That crowd has been very skeptical of Bryan Colangelo for basically the entire tenure of Colangelo. And I think that really the only positive thing he's done so far for their organization is probably, 2. He signed JJ Redick, who was a perfect fit on a 1-year deal for this roster, regardless of what the salary was. And number 2, he got the Covington extension, which I think is going to be an awesome deal for them, even if, you know, Covington takes a small step back. So I think that those 2 decisions are good, but that's not good enough for how long he's been there.
Yeah, the renegotiating an extension for Covington was well done. I mean, that they kind of cut out the parameters where they can only offer him so much. So that just really worked out. But you have to give him full credit for that. The Markelle deal, it's so hard to say in retrospect because nobody saw all this coming. At the time, Fultz had so much momentum as the number 1 pick, number 1 prospect in the class, and that fit on that roster was just tailor-made. You could run a 1-4 pick and roll with Fultz and Simmons as the roll man and have Embiid spacing the floor. There was so much versatility. So I can't really kill him for moving down to 3 and then protecting that potential Kings pick in 2019 as well, top 1 overall protected. We know historically that is the biggest mechanism to acquiring a franchise-level player is the number 1 pick in the draft. So at least he took precautionary steps to do that. But of course it looks bad in retrospect. I mean, Tatum's been good this year. Just outside of that, though, we just have no idea what's going on with Fultz. So it's really hard to analyze and put yourself back in your pre-draft mindset and kind of approach it rationally because right now it just looks bad in his face.
Right. At the time, like I said, I was a fan of that deal for both sides. I thought it made sense for both sides of that equation. It just hasn't worked out, though. And I know that kind of, Monday morning quarterbacking or, 6 months later quarterbacking probably is not fair necessarily, but it's still a part of the evaluation process, and it still is an issue for them going forward. I mean, they have to figure out now how they can get max salary cap space this summer. Like, they have to find a way out of Jared Bayless's contract. That's probably going to involve moving future assets. And they have to figure out a way to get Markelle Fultz right. They have to figure out a way to build out I don't even want to say fringes of this roster. They just have to build out this roster in a way that can allow both Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons to prosper. And I don't think that is a simple concept for them. They have everything they need in the front court now with those three in Covington, but they still have a long way to go to get to what the ceiling is for this roster, which is an NBA title at some point. Whenever you have both Simmons and Embiid on your roster at 21 and 22 years old, that is the ceiling. NBA championship is the ceiling, but they have a long way to go.
Yeah, I was thinking about this today, actually. I mean, how many more opportunities are they going to have at the very top of the draft? I mean, Simmons and Embiid are too good. They're going to be too good starting probably next year to be, a cellar-dweller team, for sure. Right. And you have a pick right now at 10 via the Lakers. You have your own pick at 17. If you don't think Fultz is right, I would consider packaging those picks to move up for Trey, honestly. I think that might make sense. You might have to move up three or four spots. If you could do that, that's something you have to contemplate. At the end of the day, I'm all for the process, not the Sixers version of the process. I am for that too, but just the process of everything to do with the NBA. It's all about the decision-making, the input, and everything that goes into the decision-making process, but that doesn't matter to a lot of people. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a result-based business. Guys get fired over decisions like this. Even if the Markelle Fultz trade made sense at the time, if it doesn't work out, you're always judged mostly by the results in this business.
So, at what point should the 76ers, and this is it's kind of crazy to say given the fact that the 76ers are currently 5 games above 500 and pretty solidly in the playoffs. They're at the 6th seed right now. At what point do they consider moving on from Bryan Colangelo? It's not going to happen this year, I don't think, but how badly do they have to continue fucking this up for it to actually make them make another choice?
I think it has to be a combination of this free agency this summer going awry in conjunction with Fultz's situation not bettering. And then maybe there's more information that leaks negatively about the franchise and how they handle the situation. And then just the societal pressure, the fan pressure, and all of that media pressure will force a decision. But it's going to come down to factors, I think, like that, if it's going to happen within the next year. I think after that, if there's not a result-based translation to the floor, if the Sixers don't make the playoffs next year, for example, and they take a step back, maybe you can start considering that. But I think it's probably going to take something more large scale if it's going to transpire in the short term.
Yeah, I think that I agree with you. There's no way they're doing it this summer. I think even a low chance they do it next summer. I think they would have to miss the playoffs. And given the fact that they have a Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, who are both going to get rapidly better, given the fact that Joel is 23 and Ben is 21, I don't know that they're ever really going to be able to make that call.
Yeah, and those guys are going to get better. Like you noted, I think they're going to be a perennial playoff team for the most part, unless, of course, injuries, God forbid, that happens with Embiid or whatnot. Just the point I was making with that is they're not going to be bad anymore. So if you're going to be at the top of the draft, you have capital. Unless the Kings end up at that number 1 spot next or in 2019, which is hard to predict because of the lottery system changing and all of that. But this might be the time to capitalize, and that's an underrated storyline that I don't see being discussed nationally at all.
That the 76ers have the actual capital to capitalize?
Well done.
No, but I agree with you. If I was the 76ers, I would probably be trying to package those picks to move up. If the Knicks end up with, say, number 7 in this draft, I think you can make a legitimate case if you're the Knicks and you just need a lot of assets to say, all right, we'll give you number 7 for number 10 and number 17. It would need to be a team, though, that needs multiple young players.
Exactly. I think that's the situation you look at, and that might be beneficial for both sides. You're still getting like this, the 17th pick right now in the draft. That's a nice commodity in this draft.
Yeah, no, 100%. And you know, like, I would think that pick probably does not end up being number 17. Like, they're a game out of 5 right now because they're a game behind Indiana. Now, they're 4 games out of the 4 with, I believe, Washington in the 4 right now, who we can move to in a second. But they're also like pretty solidly in the playoffs right now. Like, they're 4 games up on Detroit who I think is the 9 seed right now, right? It's either them or Charlotte. Like, one of those two. Charlotte's actually been on a little bit of a run recently. So this is their chance. I agree with you. This summer is their summer where they need to capitalize. And I'm just not sure that we have seen enough from Bryan Colangelo to make me think that they're going to.
I think that's entirely fair. I really don't have anything to add to the contrary. I don't want to just go around killing GMs because who knows what the ownership pressure is. I always say that. I don't like to pretend like I have behind the scenes information. You just have to go by, the evidence, what we can actually assess from a surface level view. And it's not super promising, but we'll see what happens with Markelle. I mean, that's the swing piece. If Markelle is restored to University of Washington, Markelle, this is going to be okay.
I mean, I will say this for the ownership here. They allowed him to spend like $35 million on Amir Johnson and JJ Redick last year. It does not seem that ownership is the issue.
That's fair.
So,
I mean, there could have been some ancillary benefits to that. I don't know who Amir's agent is and how that translates to this offseason. I always look for those kind of connecting pieces. I mean, obviously JJ was an overpay for 1 year, but the key was you got the 1 year, not the multiple years. You could capitalize this offseason again. So I don't know if the deals were that bad unless there was a huge opportunity cost that we weren't aware of. You're just getting to the salary floor essentially, and they really pigeonholed Covington by doing that into that amount that he could accept via renegotiating up to the amount of cap space that they had. So it worked out in that facet kind of okay, but I get it from just an expenditure standpoint. You're not getting the bang for your buck paying that much for Amir and JJ.
So yeah, I will note that Amir Johnson's agent is Bill Duffy. It's Kevin Bradbury is also involved, but he's a BDA guy. Bill Duffy guys who are free agents this summer: Zach LaVine, Patrick McCaw. Let's see, maybe Joakim Noah. I don't think anyone's going to want that. Kelly Oubre, if I remember correctly, is going to be, or no, Kelly Oubre is up for an extension, not a free agency. But Andrew Wiggins would have been, but he signed his extension. So not really a crazy number of BDA guys that are up this summer unless they want to max out Zach LaVine on an offer sheet. So I don't know that I think they just liked Amir.
Could be.
Let's move on then. Let's talk about the Wizards. The Wizards are on a hell of a run right now. What is it? It's like 8 of 11 or something, right?
I think they're 10-3 since Wall went out. The last I updated.
They're rolling. They are losing as we speak right now to the Warriors. I'm sorry. They're down 11 at home. That's fine. I mean, the Warriors are very good at basketball. What are the things that you have seen though during this run without John Wall that have you, let's say, that have you positive looking forward to the future for when John Wall comes back before we get into the other seedier side of it?
I just think, the Wizards have always had issues with consistency, being engaged. They're kind of up and down in the regular season. So when you start getting everybody involved, like, first of all, Satoransky is pretty damn good. Like, he's an effective player. He's
legitimately good at basketball.
He's good. Yeah, he's tall. He provides them some point guard defense there. He's shooting 46% from 3. He's smart on O, and it allows them to kind of retain their defensive size. So just getting a more ball-oriented system where all like Beal, Otto Porter, those guys are excellent running off screens. They can shoot off the dribble and just constant motion. Everybody probably feels a little bit more engaged. That's just a theory of mine, where you have Wall who, dominates the ball a lot and he makes great decisions. They're going to need him in the playoffs when they need higher level creation, when they start getting pressed up upon. But overall, I just think that for a team that has struggled staying concentrated during the regular season, maybe this was a good thing for the rest of their supporting cast to maybe feel more involved.
The Satoransky jump has been awesome because I actually have thought he's been pretty good for a little while now, but he just hasn't really gotten like the total chance to show it. In February, he is at 11.9 points, 6 assists, 3.3 rebounds while shooting 60% from the field and 56% from three. That is fire. That is just like his body being engulfed in flames. Good.
Yeah, I just think you can do a lot with a guy with positional size like that at the point guard position who makes smart decisions and who can shoot the ball. And, you're not taking a ton off the table defensively. He's not a bad defender. I think, again, the size aspect is huge for him. So, yeah, when you play a motion type system and if the ball is swinging around in the regular season, you're shooting threes and everybody's playing hard, you have advantages over a lot of teams in this league that just don't get up on a nightly basis for things. So maybe that is contributing to this as well.
Well, you know what this system and this particular set of players does really well is that they keep the ball moving first and foremost without John Wall. We can talk about that in a second. They certainly keep the ball moving a lot, and they all, for the most part, are really good at attacking closeouts. Like they actually are good at pump faking, putting the ball on the deck, and either finishing at the rim or pitching it back outside of the arc and getting a rotation, getting the ball into rotation, getting an extra pass to a better 3-point shot. Like it's been really impressive to me the way that they have embraced the motion offense and embraced using just their natural skill set in terms of putting the ball on the deck and allowing them to create for one another without the ball sticking.
They're adapting to their personnel. I mean, they have the shooting and the passing that a lot of teams don't surrounding Wall. And, Brad Beal is a great shooter. Otto Porter is freaking phenomenal. I mean, his progression as a shooter off motion, off the dribble even. It's
off the dribble,
tremendous.
I think, is the most important part with him. He has added that in a significant way this year.
Yes, exactly. And it's huge. I mean, it's obviously, we talk about this all the time for primary handlers and lead guards and, guys who handle the ball a lot, but even guys who don't. If you're coming off a dribble handoff, if you can take an extra dribble, shoot over the top, Otto Porter is phenomenal shooting with backward momentum. He can shoot fadeaways. He's not the fastest guy creating separation, but at his height and being able to lean back, he just creates different kind of angles. And Brad Beal, everybody knows what he is as a shooter. So, yeah, they just have the personnel to kind of swing the ball around, shoot a lot of threes, and, that's hard to guard.
What's been interesting to me, too, has been the way that they've utilized their rotation a little bit differently. They're not using Marcin Gortat nearly as much without John Wall, because part of Gortat's incredible value is he's one of the best screen setters in the NBA on drives, right? Like, he is an incredible pick and roll screen setter, and he's great at diving to the basket. Whenever John Wall is out, that skill isn't really as necessary. Like, for instance, tonight against the Warriors, he's played 14 minutes with 4 minutes left in the game. Over the last 5 games, he's at 22 minutes a night. Over the course of February, he's at 25 minutes a night. And I know that generally, at least since the new year, they've been trying to keep his minute load down even before John Wall went out, because over the course of the last few years, I mean, he's just been on the floor way too often. I mean, 31 minutes a night last year, 30 minutes a night the year before, 29.9, 32, 30. Like, he is one of the most highly used big men in the NBA, but over the last month, especially since Wall has been out, they've been using him a little bit less. They've been keeping him fresh, and I think that's going to be important for whenever they need him in the playoffs.
It's a great point, and they insert a smaller lineup, bring in Kelly Oubre, and you have Markieff Morris, who can space the floor competently. He's not like a knockdown shooter, but you at least gain some 5-out ability, and that makes you even harder to guard.
Right, and they use Mahinmi for, between 10 minutes and 15 minutes, 17 minutes a night. That helps for sure as well. They're finally getting a little bit of value out of that massive albatross contract, which is nice. They're a team that I think I expected to be way better than they are this year, and I've been disappointed by how they looked with John Wall on the floor, basically. The fact that they were only, if I remember correctly, something like 5 games above 500 with Wall on the floor this year. That's not ideal. I thought that they were a team that could potentially compete for the top of the Eastern Conference, much in the same way that Toronto is doing that right now. That just hasn't happened, though. And I am going to be interested to see the way these guys react with John Wall. How do you think that reintegration process goes now that we're seeing them do? I mean, this is a totally different offense and totally different look than we see whenever John Wall is out there.
Yeah, I agreed. When you profile and project this to the playoff setting where teams are going to downsize, there's going to be a lot more switching. Who on this team can really create their own shot at a high level? Like, Beal's pretty advanced. I don't know if he's advanced enough to really gain consistent separation. Porter has improved a ton, but I think a lot of what he does is in advantage situations, and that's not a slight. He just gets, within the offense, he gets like these pin down curl actions. He can shoot like that, which is valuable.
Well, when you're 6'8" and you can play the three regularly, it's a huge advantage.
Oh, sure. But as far as creating your own shot in like a more switch-heavy scheme in the playoffs, when you start playing against these dynamic shot creators, I'm not sure if they can hang when you start applying defensive pressure to them. If they come across like the Celtics who can really press up on the ball, can these guys really create for themselves enough? That's just tough. I mean, history says no. The style of play is going to work pretty effectively the way they're playing, but I do think they still need someone like Wall. But it has made me question my kind of philosophy on point guards and guys who are just uber athletes that can get to the rim. Those guys are super valuable. But how valuable are you if you can't really play off the ball and shoot and also initiate the offense? If you just need the ball and you don't have high-level avenues to thrive off of it, that's a tough fit in the modern NBA. I think it's a bit tougher than we get credit than is being given credit for. We have like LeBron types who are that elite creating on ball, so they don't really need to play off ball, and plus you can use them as like the screener and stuff. But just overall, if you're a lead guard type, if you're 6'3", 6'4", and you get to the rim at a high level, but you're not a floor spacer and you have to have the ball to create, maybe this is tilting like the pendulum against these guys with this performance.
Yeah, I can see that. I don't necessarily think I agree, and it's not even like you're making an argument really with it. You're just like kind of presenting an idea in a lot of ways.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I don't think that anyone really should be in this scenario. But where I am intrigued by it is having 5 shooters on the floor. I think has been a major key to what Washington has done during a lot of these stretches, right? The fact that they are able to throw out their lineups with Markieff Morris and Kelly Oubre and Otto Porter is their 3-4-5, I think has been a really interesting way to go about it. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how they integrate John Wall into those lineups more consistently, because it's almost like you're inverting your lineup a little bit, having a point guard who can't shoot surrounded by 4 shooters. I think that would help John Wall, but how much does it kind of clog the offense a little bit, having a guy sag off of Wall a little bit and cut down on passing lanes for those cutters? Like Otto Porter's an incredible cutter, for instance. Bradley Beal's a really good cutter too. So yep. I'm interested, man. Like I think that they're certainly a better team with John Wall. I'm not saying otherwise. I don't think anyone would, but it's an interesting look at how a team can look very, very different whenever, and be potentially more successful in some ways, despite the lack of a superstar player.
Yeah. It's just, and in conjunction with that, a superstar player who isn't a high level shooter. Because that's kind of the case study here is Wall can shoot a mid-range shot, but he's not that proficient from 3. Guys sag off him like you noted, and that hurts your offense. That's kind of the whole pillar of being a scheme changer, being able to shoot threes off the dribble is you dictate scheme. So Wall's doing the opposite, and he's been good enough in his career to obviously overcome that. He's an incredible passer. He's obviously super athletic. I just think it's an interesting case study to look at this iteration of the Wizards and compare it to a team that doesn't have an initiator who can't really play off the ball.
Yeah, I mean, like one interesting, kind of number to throw out there is that over the course of their last 10 games, so without John Wall, they're shooting jumpers with 0 dribbles on 51.6% of their shots, which is 42.7 field goals a night. And over the course of their season, that number is at 48% on only 38.9 field goals. So getting zero dribble jumpers is actually really, really useful. They're the most effective shots because they tend to be just open catch and shoot shots. And I think that shows just that they're getting, 3 or 4 better looks a game without the presence of John Wall, which is a little bit weird.
Yeah, and I think that's how teams should run their offenses, is obviously searching for the highest value shots first in the shot clock, but you still need guys at the end who can get their own shot. That's where Wall comes in. But it's just really fascinating for me personally that you're kind of experiencing, we don't get to see this very often, the effects of a star caliber player like Wall, who's a very specific kind of archetype, be removed from an ecosystem, and then watch those guys kind of try to pick up the pieces. And I think they've done a pretty damn good job of that.
Yeah, they've done a great job of it for sure. I mean, do we want to talk about anyone else? I mean, we've talked about now 2 teams in the East. Is there anyone else in the East that you're particularly interested in right now?
Nobody really jumps off the page. I got to start going through all these teams, winding down with the season, and I got to watch more Toronto. I've seen a little bit of them. Boston is always interesting. I mean, we've talked about Boston several times on the podcast, but nothing really stands out to me.
They're just such a fascinating team, though. Like in so many ways, because of the Gordon Hayward injury, because of all of the youth, because of the way that they operate. Like, they're a really interesting team to me.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that's why I keep talking about them, because they are fascinating. They've been able to integrate young players into their starting lineup that are playing pivotal roles for them, and they still. I mean, all of the narratives about them, like Kyrie not being, I don't know. It is a fascinating situation because they are in different kind of wavelengths as far as their team building. They have different kind of general areas. So Horford's obviously they're more on the elderly end. Then you have Kyrie, and then you have your young guys. So just you don't see a lot of teams that are building in those multifaceted ways and also trying to compete in the short term.
What do we think of? I do actually want to talk very, very quickly about Kyrie Irving, because he has been really, really good recently, and I think it's worth bringing up just how well he's played.
He's a great player. I think that the narratives with him were always a little over the top. I get that he's not the most high-level creator for others, but he's a really effective player, and that's one of the guys that you want on your team in the playoffs, because he is, at his peak, probably one of the 5 best shot makers in the league. And to beat these elite-level teams, you have to have that kind of firepower. So I'm a Kyrie guy. I mean, I get the deficiencies there, but he probably gets kind of a raw deal by a lot of people.
Since the All-Star break, 27 points on 54% shooting, 52% from 3, 6 assists, 6 rebounds, only 1.5 turnovers. It's just been ridiculous. It's what he's done since the All-Star break. Like, the shooting is going to fall off because the shooting always falls off whenever you're on that kind of a ridiculous clip. But since the All-Star break, he's really, really turned it on. I think he kind of wants that number 1 overall seed. I think he wants to kind of take it on his shoulders and be the guy who leads them there. Yeah,
that's kind of goes along with his entire attitude since, wanting to be out of LeBron's shadow. He wants his own team, and if he can carry those guys to the number 1 seed, I mean, I think that's exactly what he'd want.
Yeah. Let's go on ahead and move on to some NBA draft talk. Let's talk about Collin Sexton first, because I don't know what to make of him anymore. I still think he is, more than anything, I guess, like a high floor prospect, more than like a super duper high ceiling prospect. Would you agree with that at least?
I would.
What do you like about him that you think makes him a high floor prospect?
I mean, he has above average athleticism for an NBA lead guard. I think his athleticism is overrated overall. I've been saying that just because he's so physical and so aggressive. What? You don't think so?
I think the quickness is really good, and I think his change of pace is really good.
I think it's pretty good. I'm not willing to go really good, but it depends on who we're comparing him to. Coming into the season, this guy was compared to like Allen Iverson as far as like shiftiness. He's not even close to that.
No, he's not that.
Yeah, so I mean, he's fine. I don't have any issues with him there. I mean, he's around the basket. He doesn't have ridiculous explosiveness. He's got some pop for sure, and he's super physical. He'll finish through contact.
Yeah.
But for me, it just comes down to he's not improving this year. I mean, I watched a ton of him recently, and he's still not making the reads with the ball. I was impressed with him at the Hoop Summit because he was showing more proclivity to hit like pocket passes, some skips, and he is not even seeing the floor that well. And in conjunction with his shot, which I've never been a fan of mechanically, I think the high floor, to address your question specifically, comes in conjunction with his athleticism and his approach to the game. His motor, how he's wired, I don't think he's going to fail. But the ceiling stuff with the shooting and all of that, and the passing, especially if he's your starting caliber lead guard, if you want to move forward with him as your kind of primary initiator type, that's a little worrisome.
So, yeah, I actually agree with a lot of that. The athleticism stuff is, I was pretty surprised by that. Like, I actually think that he is a good athlete. Like, the fact that he has the stop-start ability, the fact that he has the good change of direction ability, his hips are really fluid, which allows him to go right to left so quickly. He's not Allen Iverson. Of course he's not Allen Iverson. Allen Iverson is a freak. But he is still a very, very good point guard who can get separation with ease. The problems that I have with him really do revolve around the shooting and passing, as you mentioned. His shooting has been abysmal recently. I think over his last 12 games, he's at 24% from three. That is awful. And the mechanics, as you mentioned, this isn't a Trae Young situation where Trae Young shot 19% over the course of a 7-game sample because Trae Young just got really cold. He's still an unbelievable shooter, and he has everything on his shoulders. Collin Sexton, there's not really a reason for him to have everything on his shoulders. That Alabama roster has very real talent. They have at least 3 other guys who will be on an NBA Summer League roster at the very least, if not become flat out draft picks, and Herb Jones, John Petty, and Dante Hall. So that's also what scares me with the lack of passing. The fact that he is so single-minded in terms of just driving to the basket and trying to score, he has real teammates who can actually do things. He needs to get them involved more often. This is not an Oklahoma situation where Trae Young is surrounded by Christian James, who might play on a Summer League roster at some point, Brady Manick, who is fine as a freshman, and Kadeem Latin and Jamoni McNeese. None of those guys are going to be difference makers. Alabama has very real difference makers next to him, and he just doesn't involve them in a scary way.
He gets tunnel vision. His drive and kick vision is not good. He just drives to really explode through bigs, and that's not going to work at the NBA level. He's not that explosive. He's not Dennis Smith. He's not De'Aaron Fox level of athlete, and that's a problem. And he had reads against Florida where there was a big in the dunker spot. He could have just dropped it off. It's a simple pass, and instead he just explodes through and tries to finish. And I don't think his touch is that great either, and that's a reflection of his shooting as well. So I look at him, and he to me is a no-fail guy just for his character. But I don't know how much stock to put in that. I can only evaluate what I see on the floor, and what I'm seeing is just not impressive. I think that he's clinging on to top 10 lottery status because of his name value, and it's just not being supported on the court for me.
So I actually have moved him out of my top 10. I will say that. I do not have him as the best prospect currently playing in the SEC, as we'll talk about in a minute here. I do still have him in the lottery, though. I have him in the late lottery right now. I have him at number 12. I have him below Wendell Carter. I have him below the guy we'll talk about in a second, Daniel Gafford, and below both Bridgeses. That's not a place that I had him earlier in the year, as of even a month and a half ago. So he's certainly not gotten better at all. And you bring up the driving. The finishing around the rim is terrifying to me, given the fact that he can't shoot and can't pass. So, he's finishing at 47% in half-court settings at the rim right now. That's in the 27th percentile nationally. That's just not good enough. His catch and shoot right now, he's at 22.7 field goal percentage, 34.1 effective field goal percentage. That is terrifying. Now, he is a decent shooter off the dribble. He's at 46.3 in terms of effective field goal percentage. But those numbers are going down, not up. They're not going the right direction. And whenever you combine that with the tunnel vision, with the lack of, honestly, I think it's a lack of desire to get his teammates involved at times. He just wants to put everything on his shoulders and doesn't trust them. He needs to develop trust for his teammates. And you can make the case that, maybe once he gets to the NBA, he'll be surrounded by NBA players and he'll start to trust them. that doesn't always work. I mean, I don't think he is as much of like a full-on can't miss prospect as we thought. I do think that like he's probably, so like we talked about Terry Rozier earlier, right? Like Terry Rozier, yep, I think has a lot of similarities to what Collin Sexton is. Would you agree?
I think that's probably fair.
And he has gotten better. He went to a great situation for development. He improved his jump shot. He started to use his tenacity in more positive manners. He improved a bit as a passer, I would say as well. I think that is more the comp than like potential all-star level comp.
Yeah, I'm more comfortable with that. I think he has a slight Kemba Walker upside, but Kemba didn't start shooting threes until his 5th year. Yeah. And his progression in that way is, I don't know if you can really bank. I don't know if you can bank on that. Like I really like Sexton. Being around him at the Hoop Summit, his character is really infectious.
Right.
I'm pulling for him. But based on what we see on the court, I just don't have a lot of confidence in that guy being my primary initiator in my team. Like we just talked about John Wall, who's a better athlete than Sexton, is a far better passer. And even his translation might be, I mean, let's not go too far. Like there could be some questions with him, and he's a much better prospect in my opinion than Collin Sexton.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, the John Wall thing is probably a little bit overboard, but sure. you even admitted that yourself. Let's move on. Like I said, like Collin Sexton needs to get his shit together, basically. Let's just leave it at that. Sure. I have Daniel Gafford at number 10 on my board right now. Tell me if I am drunk.
Okay, so my first question. So you're saying he has starting equity in the league then, or you just don't like this class very much because we're talking about a big in the most fungible position in the league as far as guys that are spot starters. So I'm guessing you lean towards him being an effective starter.
I think he can be a starter, yep.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess let's start with
you question me for a change.
So what do you see that really pops for you on film? Like what is his specific trait or multiple traits that just stand out for you?
So I think he is an elite level rim runner. I'm just at that stage where I'm willing to say that. He is an elite level rim runner. 91st percentile in terms of shooting at the basket and half court settings. The comp that I made in the write-up that I did is that he's like watching a very tall Vince Young play basketball, like the former Texas quarterback. Like you remember Vince Young had those super long strides where you didn't realize he was going as fast as he was. And then he just looked like a freight train who was never going to stop like running and covering like 10 yards at a time with each stride. That's kind of what Daniel Gafford is to me. He covers such large like portions of the court with ease and beats teammates down the floor. And he can just do so much with that, ability to run the floor. And then you throw in the fact that he's an elite level vertical athlete. Like he is a hyper elite level vertical athlete. Like I was told that they tested his like max vertical jump. So like your standing reach plus your max vertical leap. So I guess it's max vertical reach. I'm sorry, not max vertical jump. They tested it at a level that was just like slightly lower than what Rudy Gobert's is, despite the fact that Gafford is 3 inches shorter, maybe 2 inches shorter, and has 7-inch shorter arms. So I think that probably shows you just how ridiculous he is in terms of vertical. You watch him though, and that ability to just reach over players pops. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree. I think that in conjunction with his effort level, which I'm sure is alluring to you too. That guy plays his ass off.
He plays incredibly hard. That dude is motor going every single minute of every single game. And I think that one place that shows, he's probably out of all of the top big guys in this class. We'll throw Robert Williams in that. We'll throw Mitchell Robinson in that. We'll throw like all of the first round bigs. I think he's the best screen setter out of all of those guys. You watch him, he gets a wide base. He actually tries to make contact, but he also has a feel for when he should slip it and just go and rim run and use those long strides to get ahead of steam. He's a really smart screen setter too. And that's very important, underrated aspect of being a good rim runner, the ability to create space for your teammates. And where you see that most is in the statistical effect and in the scouting effect too, because you can see it whenever you watch their games of when he's on the floor. So they're at 1.17 points per possession when he's on the floor, 1.08 when he's off the floor. Their effective field goal percentage jumps by about 4% when he's on the floor, in large part not because of 2-point shooting, but because of 3-point shooting. Because when he sets screens and rim runs, the rest of the defense just has to collapse in on him to try and bump him and knock him off of his head of steam, and that creates shots for everyone else. It creates very easy looks. He already has that sense of gravity from college opponents, and he can just get so high off the ground, much in the same way that DeAndre Jordan does, that it's going to be difficult for, I think, NBA folks to even guard him in that way.
I agree. I think his leaping ability, his coordination in the air as a lob catch finisher, that gravity that he'll generate, if you get him in a spread pick and roll system, I think he can be effective. I don't think he's precisely the same player as Clint Capella, but if you have that kind of system where he can be a rim runner and he can play in space, he can dribble a little bit too. Like, he can put the ball on the floor once or twice in space, load up and dunk. Like, he's somewhat skilled. I think that his post game, he at least has some functionality there. And as a passer, I think that he can be decent. Maybe in time he can make a short roll pass. I just question, for a lot of these teams that don't just run spread pick and roll, like the Mavericks love to run spread pick and roll, but if you're not one of those teams, do you think he has any kind of shooting equity or passing or playmaking equity?
I think he's going to shoot it at some point. I really do. Like, you like talk to people around there, and he came to Arkansas like not being able to shoot it all. And he's already like knocking down 18-footers occasionally. And you look at like the mechanics are pretty solid. And the touch is obviously really good. Like, that's the thing that we haven't talked about yet. To me, the comp for him is something like a combination of Steven Adams and DeAndre Jordan without the bulk. Like, part of what makes those two incredibly valuable is the fact that they're both like 250 pounds. Right, and like 270 pounds in DeAndre's case. He's not that, and I don't think he'll ever quite be that. But the reason that I bring up Adams is that he has that little floater game. He has that ability to actually just go up over guys and like just float the ball over them and finish effectively and efficiently. The DeAndre Jordan stuff has to do with his catch radius being incredible and his ability to and Steven Adams does this too. He absolutely rebounds outside of his area, and by outside of his area, I mean well outside of his area a lot of the time. And in addition to that, he's a really huge, just rim running, diving, catching, leaping radius too. Like, he can jump from 10 feet away from the basket and dunk. Like, that is valuable.
It's absolutely valuable. And I think what you hit on with the girth element is where I wanted to go next, because I get the offensive translatability. He's got a pretty damn clear skill set in the modern game, and I do think he has some skill upside. For me, it's the two-level defense. Yeah. The interior, obviously he's a good rim protector at the college level. I think he'll be effective in the NBA.
I will say I'm sneaky worried about both, but continue.
Yeah, I'm not profiling to be any kind of interior, like, dynamic rim protector. I just don't think he has the girth. He's a little slow to load up at times, but I do trust the motor. He's going to try. Maybe the intellect isn't advanced, but I think it's workable. It just comes down to the girth element for me, getting moved around inside. He doesn't have the most imposing frame. And then on the perimeter, we see the lack of ability to bend his knees. This is something that a lot of, movement specialists have noted. He just can't really sink that low in his stance. Can he guard in space? So what do you think about those two arguments as far as his overall defensive impact?
Yeah, I'm going to be really interested to talk to NBA folks after they have him in for like workouts, just because I want to know if it's that he can't actually bend his knees and sit down in a stance, or if it's that he just doesn't have the like mechanical backing to do it yet, because he gives a damn out on the perimeter. Like, he tries to disrupt, like, he uses his hands. He reaches a little bit too much, to be honest, but like, he really cares, and he'll like keep his feet active. He never is like stopped and like standing in place. He really does give a lot of effort, I think, on that end, out on the perimeter. He's just really heavy footed right now because his upper half looks to me to be a little bit sturdier maybe than his lower half. And it leads to him being heavy-footed. And another aspect of this is that, I mentioned the long striding thing is a major benefit for him on offense. I think it's actually a hindrance for him defensively, because if you watch him, he's like, it takes him a minute to load up and like he lumbers a little bit. And I think that's where, me talking to actual NBA executives after they get him in and see what their strength and conditioning folks, think they can do with his lower half, if he can bend and if he can slide defensively, that's going to be the key for him. Like if he can do that, he's an NBA starter. Like maybe not next year, but the year after. If he can actually defend the perimeter, I have no qualms about him. Like if he can defend the perimeter, he's a top 8 player in this class.
I don't have any questions about the motor. I don't think it's a want-to issue at all. Like
not again,
at all. The murder bones hot. It burns hot with him. Like he plays hard. I think it's in every element of the game. I see that running back and transition, both ends, everything. But if he can't defend in space adequately, and I agree that the steps he has are kind of lumbering. You see Ayton, and Ayton has those explosive kind of slides that he just moves really quickly, and It just looks like it's going to translate. Gafford is not really like that. He kind of bounds a little bit more. So that's an issue. And then the interior, again, can he anchor a defense? Can he anchor against these bigger NBA rim protectors? And, hold position on the glass, hold position on the interior, take contact when he's protecting the rim from a standstill. I have questions about that. I just don't think he profiles as a dynamic defensive player. So that gets me back to the original question of if you have him at number 10, do you think the offensive upside is going to be that considerable?
I legit think he can be like one of the 5 best rim runners in the NBA. Like if he hits like his ceiling. Like that's where I'm at. Like I think he can actually be at that level. How valuable is that? That actually is a very fair question. I think it's tremendously valuable because of the gravity it creates for a defense to have to adjust to. The defense, I think, is the swing factor with him. If he can defend either the interior or the perimeter, I think he's a starter. And I'm willing to bet on the athletic upside in that case.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is fair. When you're valuing a player like this, like DeAndre Jordan, for example, can anchor a defense. He's also a gravitational lob threat offensively. So he has value on both sides, but he's legit huge on defense. Like he can definitely anchor on the glass. He can protect the rim. You have a Capella type who, again, I think has a little bit more of a slender build, but he's playing with 2 of the best initiators in the league.
Right.
Like getting optimized in every sense of the word, and he moves better on the perimeter. So I look at a guy like Gafford, and you could pick out situations potentially in the mid-lottery where you have an initiator type who can really maximize his utility offensively, and if he checks out defensively as even a 1-level guy, maybe not even a 2-level guy, that might be tolerable. I'm just not sure if I value that skill set enough in a vacuum to have him where you do, but I understand the argument. Yeah,
so the Capella one from a frame perspective I think is pretty much dead on. Like Capella was 6'11", 222 before his draft year, and that was measured at Nike Hoop Summit in 2014. Gafford right now, I believe, is 6'11", with like between a 7'2" and 7'3" wingspan. That's about 2 inches shorter than what Capella's is, so that's a pretty significant difference. Gafford's a better leaper. There are going to be some mitigating factors each way there. But that's the comp, I think. It is probably more of a Capella, but unlike Capella, I like the touch and I like the skill level a little bit more.
I think that's fair as a prospect. I don't remember Capella coming out. Capella's really developed like short roll passing. He has some touch. It's not great. I think you're probably right to lean towards Gafford in that respect. I just think it's going to take a pretty specific ecosystem to draw out all of his positives for the kind of archetype he is. But again, that also applies to a lot of different players in this range. I tend to feel more safe with wings because they're more easily adjustable to certain systems. But Gafford does have pluses. I mean, I have him in the top 20 right now. So it's not like I'm saying I don't like the kid. I mean, he obviously has a lot of traits that you really look for. The motor is really going to help him with executives. I know that.
So let me get totally bananas here. Wendell Carter. Compare him to Wendell Carter. I think he's probably an inch taller than Carter. He is considerably more athletic. Carter is a better shooter, to be sure. He's definitely a lot more polished with his footwork. But they each have very similar questionable flaws in terms of, are they going to be able to defend the interior? Are they going to be able to defend the perimeter? I trust Gafford to make up for those weaknesses a little bit more than I trust Carter.
If you're looking at it from that vantage point and assessing defense on two levels like that in a vacuum, I agree with you. I think that's definitely, there's a reason to argue that. But I think as an overall team defender, as far as reacting to things quickly, as far as positioning, Carter's ahead of him. And Carter's ahead of a lot of guys. Like he's a really good team defensive player. And I think, he's going to have limitations protecting the rim. I totally get that. He's going to get exploded over the top. He's not that quick laterally. So if you frame the question like that, I get where you're going. But I think that Carter has a special intellect. And then you talk about offensive capability, and you weigh the difference between playing a 5-out system, where I legitimately think Carter's going to shoot NBA threes within like his first 2 or 3 seasons. Like he just looks like he can.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Maybe not proficiently, but Carter is so smart offensively. So it comes down to, what do you value? What system can you optimize these guys in? For Carter, definitely higher playmaking upside for sure. He can dribble, he can pass, he knows where to kind of attack. And then Gafford, of course, you just have the more explosive in-traffic gravitational lob catching, so it's what you prefer.
Yeah, I think it's all team concept, too. Like, what do you run? If you're a spread pick and roll team, I think you draft Gafford for sure. If you're a team who's going to run a little bit more motion, who's going to run some more dribble handoffs, you probably draft Carter.
That's a fair argument. And then you could also say, if you run a spread pick and roll, what would you rather have? A gravitational roller, or would you rather have a guy who can pop and your guards have better access to get in the lane? So that's a counter argument to that, if you just want to run a 5-out system, if you really do believe a guy like Carter can shoot.
Yeah, that's true. I would probably rather have the gravitational player, but I do understand that argument at least. The other thing with Carter that scares me, and it scares me a little bit with Gafford too, the rebounding is a little bit worrisome with Wendell Carter, because a lot of he doesn't rebound really out of his area, but he is really good at establishing position and understanding where rebounds are going to go, so he doesn't have to rebound out of his area, and that speaks to his intellect again.
And this goes to the difference between, do you want a high pointer guy who chases the ball out of his area, or do you want a guy who consistently boxes out? Like that's another added way a way that you can add value in the pros is, we've seen guys like Robin Lopez. He doesn't get a ton of rebounding credit a lot, but he boxes out every time and his teammates get the rebound. So there's other factors to that, but I get what you're saying for sure.
Right. Is there any other like random NBA draft prospect you want to talk about before we get out of here? Is there anyone that you've seen recently that you want to spit some fire takes?
I will have some fire takes. I have 2 freshmen that are considered 2019 guys in my top 13 currently. I want to know what you think.
Drunk. I know one of them.
Okay, so first one's DeAndre Hunter. That is one.
Yeah.
The second one is Zhaire Smith. So I want to get your thoughts on both those guys.
Sorry, you're drunk on both. I mean, neither of them can shoot right now. Like, of all people who are concerned about this, neither of them can shoot right now. I'm shocked.
I'm not totally sure about that. Honestly, I look at DeAndre Hunter, who can actually shoot off the dribble a little bit. Like him playing against Miami's zone, like he seems like, I agree, they're not locks to shoot by any means. If they are locks to shoot, then everybody should have them in their lottery, frankly, because I've seen, you talk about DeAndre Hunter as one of the most valuable archetypes you can possibly acquire in the modern NBA. And a guy that has that kind of size and length, athleticism, who can defend bigger kind of combo forward types and guard maybe 3-4 positions. That's insanely valuable. But yeah, not a shoe-in to shoot at all. Zhaire Smith, freak athlete. We've talked about this off air as far as the comparison with what Hamidou Diallo, what people thought he would be. That's kind of what Zhaire Smith is. I really love that kid, man. I think he has so much intellect, too. He has good feel. I like kids that play in motion offenses in college. It kind of teaches them how to read and react. He has that ability. I've been blown away by him.
This is a weird question because DeAndre Hunter is already, like, very jacked. But, like, are you a little bit worried about the frame? Like, do you think he's a little bit too big already?
He still moves okay. He doesn't have the OG kind of quick twitch to him.
Yeah.
But I knew a couple guys at the Miami game that saw him in person and said that he is almost OG. He's built really thick already, and I don't think he struggles that much with movement. Like, he's not super quick twitch, but he's quick enough. I think he's quick enough and he's strong. And so that's the key. That's so much of what NBA defending is now, is being strong, being able to absorb contact and switch and hold your position. I think he can do all that stuff.
So I do not think he would be selected in the lottery if he was to come out this year. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would.
I will probably have him in my top 15 for the 2019 draft. Like if I was slotting him right now, realistically, let me think of where I would have him. Would you have him over? Do you have him over Troy Brown? I guess I should ask.
I do.
So, what do you like about him more than you like Troy Brown? Because I know that you like Troy Brown.
I like Troy Brown, but there are athleticism concerns, and there's more downside with him, in my opinion, just because he's not going to bring the same caliber of defense. He's not quite as big. He doesn't have quite the versatility. And with Brown, there's so much is banking on the shooting. If he doesn't shoot, he could be like an Evan Turner type. So there's just a little bit more downside, even though I'm a huge fan of his, and I would bet on him. I have him 14 right now. But DeAndre Hunter's just more valuable to me.
Okay, here's going to be my case. If you got Evan Turner at 16, are you mad?
I'm not thrilled. I'm probably not pissed off, but
I would be legitimately happy if I got Evan Turner at 16.
I can't say I would. I think there's more valuable players in the modern game. I mean, what the league is now is, can you play team defense? Can you react quickly to situations where you close out to guys? So often, I've heard coaches like Steve Clifford talk about this. Some guys like Malik Monk has struggled so much with team defense, and he's almost unplayable for them because you have to have guys that know what the hell they're doing in a team construct to could defend, but you also need the shooting, right? That's why Mikal Bridges is so valuable, because he can do both of those things. Like Hunter and Smith, I agree, and Troy Brown. They might all not shoot, but at least they have the instincts and they have the defensive capability and they have the foundation to where if they do shoot, they easily return probably even top 10 value in this class.
So I guess that my next thing would be like, so Evan Turner is actually like a very valuable like secondary creator though. Like I get the efficiency questions with him and the fact that he really can't shoot and you have to find a way to work around that and it limits the way you can build your roster going forward. But like if you put Evan Turner in a smart system, like he can actually do things. He is a useful player for Portland.
Yeah, I thought he was a useful player for Boston. Portland is a little bit harder of a sell for me, especially surrounding guys like Dame and CJ, where you always want them to have the ball. I don't know where you're going if Turner's initiating your offense. If he has the ball a lot, he just doesn't have the dynamism to get to the rim as far as the athleticism or the pull-up effectiveness to generate a ton of gravity. So he's just a tougher fit, but on a second unit, I guess it's not the worst thing. That's what I'm saying.
Like he's a second unit, like lead/secondary ball handler. And if you get that at 16, I think you're fine.
Yeah, I don't think you're pissed off, but I'm shooting for higher upside and a higher reality, even though if you look historically at drafts, of course, it probably levels off before that, even as far as effectiveness. So I get what you're saying.
Right. Zhaire Smith is really good. I like Zhaire Smith a little bit more than I like DeAndre Hunter right now. I would say DeAndre Hunter certainly has a higher ceiling, but I do understand why you really like Zhaire Smith. He plays really hard. He's already a really good defender in both team concepts and in one-on-one concepts.
Yes.
I think that DeAndre doesn't really ever get really super hard assignments. So it's really hard to tell with him sometimes. Zhaire Smith gets really hard assignments for them.
No, Zhaire Smith, I agree. Right now, I think he's better. But when you project him and assessing value, like my first step of the analysis process is what a player is. And I'm moving into how valuable that player is at the next level. And for me, DeAndre Hunter just has a higher upside as far as value on a good team. He's just harder to get than Zhaire, even though I love Zhaire.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, I would say that if either of them declared, I would understand selecting them in the first round. I tend to be more risk averse than you in terms of evaluation. So this shouldn't come as no surprise. Like none of this should be a surprise that I'm a little bit more risk averse in this scenario. Would you rather have Kyrie Thomas or Zhaire Smith?
Oh, Zhaire Smith at times 1,000.
Really?
Oh yeah, easily.
Why? Okay. This is going to be fun. Why?
Well, I mean, Zhaire Smith he's more athletic on ball. He's
definitely more athletic.
He's adept off ball. In my opinion, he's like a borderline great team defender for his age. Like he has rare instincts as far as rotating for blocks. I think he just gets it. And you consider the age and the progression. If he shoots a three, I get Kyrie's much more easy to bet on shooting the ball. And I think he might be a little safer in some respects. But if Zhaire hits, he's going to quadruple Kyrie Thomas's value in the NBA.
So, like, here would be my case otherwise. Kyrie Thomas is, I think, 2 years older, right? In reality, we're projecting role player, like, roles for both of these guys, right?
I think that's fair. I'm not going to go there with Zhaire. I think he has higher upside than that.
Okay. Over his last 12 games, Kyrie Thomas is shooting 64%, 52% from three, is averaging 17 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists a night. He's also one of the 3 best perimeter defenders in the country. Just like full stop. Like he is, if not the best on-ball defender in the country, he is certainly in the top 3, right?
I think that's fair. He's a great technician, man. I really enjoy his defense. He's super disciplined.
And he's super long. He is tough as shit. And like he actually just knows what he's doing. Like he can full on shoot already. He can finish at the rim already. And he can actually kind of pass and create for his teammates a little bit. Like to me, if I'm drafting a role player, and that honestly, that is what I think Zhaire is. Like I don't really see much. Like what do you think of his creative ability? Like I don't think he's really all that creative.
I think he can get to his spots. I've seen him handle and like shoot fadeaways. He has some functional handle. The skill level, of course, isn't there at a high level yet, but I've seen some interesting passes he's made. He's just young, man. I just checked. He's 3 years younger than Kyrie Thomas. So
yeah,
for what he already has in his toolbox, this is not just like a dice roll like a Hamidou Diallo would be. Like not a functional athlete. Like Zaire's a very real prospect. Like he has legitimate upside, and I already think he has kind of a safe floor. The shooting again, like you're not gonna hear an argument from me about comparing Kyrie to Zhaire as far as shooting the ball. I trust Kyrie Thomas's ability to shoot the ball, but at the end of the day, his defense is it really going to translate to a borderline elite level at the NBA level as far as defending these hyper athletes, or would you bet on somebody like Zhaire who already has the instincts but has that athleticism in spades? I think he could literally be an Avery Bradley type who's 6'5" and actually a good team defender.
See, it's funny. I was going to bring up Avery Bradley for Kyrie Thomas because Avery's at his best defending ones and twos, right? And being like an off-ball shooter who can kind of create a little bit off the bounce. Like that's kind of what Kyrie Thomas is, I think.
I agree. I just think that Avery's a better athlete. And when you apply that to guarding point guards, I'm not sure if Kyrie can hang. Like I think he's super disciplined. I really enjoy watching him play. But when you have him, what is he going to defend at the next level that's going to be really valuable? That's my question, is like bigger twos. He can hang for sure. Is he going to be that effective? We know that the bigger wings have more defensive value than, the smaller kind of combo types.
Well, I think it's a Beverly deal, right? Where he can just like annoy the ever-loving shit out of primary ball handlers.
Yeah, I think that's the role you want him in for sure. Do you think he's as athletic as Beverly is?
Probably not, but he's longer.
Yes. He has the length. There's no issue with me there. I look at Zhaire and I think he can actually matter defensively. I think that Kyrie will be solid. I don't know if he's going to be impactful. And when I'm looking for like a guy in the draft, I want somebody who has the chance to be impactful. I guess that's a philosophy difference. Kyrie will be fine. I don't think he's going to bust. I think he's a safer pick in certain respects. Maybe not for me personally, but I can understand the argument. But for me, I want impact. I want like the higher ceiling when you have a projectable floor. And I think that's what Zhaire has.
Okay. Why would you take him over Shai Alexander?
Shai is so disciplined, but again, I don't know if he has like the real batshit athleticism. You know what I mean? Fair. Like I just don't. I love Shai. I don't really know what to do with him, honestly, because he's so good. Like he's Kentucky's best player by a significant margin, in my opinion. But does what he does well really translate to the NBA? I think he can defend in a team construct for sure, but when we're kind of sussing between these different prospects, I think Zaire's on-ball defense has much higher upside than Shai's does, and I think that off the ball, they're pretty damn comparable.
Yeah, I think that if you're that high on Zhaire Smith's upside, I can understand that. Like if you believe that, I guess my thing with Shai is like, Shai gets to his spot whenever he wants in college. He's just so big and so long and can handle. And he actually does have, he has a good first step. He's not like super explosive vertically, but he has a really good first step laterally. I would trust that guy who's also bigger and longer than Zhaire more than I would trust Zhaire.
Interesting. Yeah, I get the argument.
You're very in on Zhaire Smith.
I am. I'm completely bought in, dude. I love young kids that show high intellect, and if you pair it with that kind of athleticism that could be game changing at two positions, like what are we doing here?
Yeah, no, I don't even disagree with you. I just think that I don't know that we have enough sample yet to like know what his upside is offensively.
Yep, I agree with that.
Cole, do you have anything else you want to chat about? Do you have any other draft hot takes? This could be fun.
I'm trying to look. I mean, I have Jonte at 17. We've already talked about Jonte in the past. What do you think of his game? We've talked
about him on the podcast.
Yeah, so he obviously coming off the best game of his career, with all the scouts going to see Michael, who didn't play. Do you think Michael's going to play this year? Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I can't answer that. Like it'd be irresponsible for me to try and answer. You know what I mean? Sure.
People have been asking. I think it's worth maybe like making the statement like, should he play? Because that's been a question for many people. Like, does it actually benefit him to play? I don't know that it does. Like, the only way I would say that he should play if he is absolutely unequivocally 100%. If that's the case, sure, play. If he's not, I don't think he should play. I mean, Jonte, though, he was a stud. He's such a stud last night. Shout out to Jonte for making me money betting on Missouri against Vanderbilt. Yeah, I mean, he dropped 24, 7, and 6. He was the fulcrum of everything that they did in that game. Like, part of it is, hey, he went 4 for 4 from 3, and that's not always going to happen with him. Like, he's a 35% shooter where he went 100% from 3. That's fine. But, like, he did so many other things. He was really good in handoff settings. He's a smart diver. He's not like a traditional rim runner, but he knows how to time dives. I don't think he's ever going to defend in the NBA at a high level, which is why I have him at like 30 right now. But I get why you have him that high if you really just buy into the intellect.
Yeah, and that's what I am. The age, I mean, he's the youngest player in the class if he declares for the draft, and you just don't see his level of intelligence on both sides. I do think, again, similar to Wendell Carter, he's a good team defender. He knows where to be, and you can compensate for some lack of athleticism by reacting quickly. Really quick on Michael Porter, I'm with you 100%. I think that if he's not 100%, he shouldn't play, but it also bears mentioning that if he doesn't play, I don't think there's any chance he goes number 1. Do you agree?
I don't think he's going to go number 1 anyway. Like, I'll just be honest. I don't think he's going to go number 1. Even if he would play, if he would drop 25 points a night, there's still going to be the concern about his back, I think. Like, you can even say that team doctors could clear him, but you look at the history of back injuries in the NBA, and it's not positive. It's not great. So, I mean, I don't think he's going to go number 1. So if I don't think that upside exists, I don't think he should come out. Or I don't think he should like necessarily play unless he's 100%.
It's reasonable. I think there's a small tail upside that he could go number 1 if he just comes out and just completely dominates and he gets cleared medically by team doctors, just because these execs have already seen him so much. They know what he's capable of. Everybody knows who he is if he's healthy. And if he, shows certain things at the college level, we see any ball skills, the defense. I think he has a shot, but I would bet heavily against it. Yeah, I think that's basically where I'm at. Like, I just can't. If we're talking like a 1% outcome or like a 5% outcome even, I don't think it's worth it unless he's 100%. Yeah, I think that's all we got this time. I mean, we've gone an hour and 22 minutes. That's way too long. I'm good. I think we're good. Cole, tell the people where they can find your work. As usual, on thestepien.com, I will have an article coming out probably Friday on Miles Bridges' shot diversity. So kind of looking at his improvements off the dribble this year, which he didn't do anything off the dribble last year. So he has shown some flashes there against Purdue, especially, that kind of changed his outcome radius as well. I talked about McHale the last time I was on, so look for that on the Ode to Odin NBA Draft podcast as usual, and continue to tune into this podcast. Well, Miles is interesting because
I want to say like through the first like 25 games of the year for them, like he was actually not shooting well off the dribble. Looking at the numbers here, they've gotten a little bit better. He's in the 51st percentile. That really helps. Still a little bit under 40% as an effective field goal shooter because a lot of those are like 2 dribble jumpers into like the 16-foot range, which he needs to get rid of that shit immediately. But yeah, that's an interesting topic. I'll actually really be excited to read that.
Yeah, this year he started 9 of 39 off the dribble, like you noted, and since then it's 18 of 39. So in conjunction with his final year or his last year's stats, there's just been a huge eruption. All this could be small sample variance. I think the film is always more convincing because college samples can vary so much. So yeah, I guess be on the lookout for that. And wait, time out. I got to list this stat. I just found it on my Twitter page. So in his career in college, he started out 17 of 76 on pull-ups through his freshman year and then the beginning of this year. And he ended 18 of 39 since that. So that's kind of the deviation that he's seen recently, which backs up what you said.
It's not a particularly hot start. Please go subscribe to The Athletic. Keep me employed over there. We'll be back later this week. I want to talk about Toronto. I have to talk about Toronto because they're one of my favorite teams in the NBA this year. They are just fascinating in how they are absolutely going to be a top 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. Keep it locked here for that. And until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.